Man, little change of pace here. And since I didn't really get to cover all the topics I wanted to in the last video without making it too long, decided if I got up early, which I have here, that I would do a tropical outlook because there have been a few new developments on this. So let's go ahead and get right into it. All right, so we have two new systems that have just come off the West African coast here. We have one that has a 20% chance of developing within the next 48 hours. It doesn't go up too much higher within the next 5 days, but I do see it developing. I do see a more favorable environment, so development beyond the next 5 days is very possible. So this will be one that I keep a close eye on. This one has no chance of developing right now according to NHC, but I do think this will change over the next couple of days. I also would begin to think that depending on how far these two tend to track south, this could become a more valuable threat to land. Reason I say that is there's been a lot of wind shear over the Caribbean and the Gulf, which has been inhibiting tropical development closer to home. But I've recently been kind of seeing something along the lines of maybe that wind shear starting to dissipate or lighten up just enough for some storms to maybe pop up. And I'm very concerned about this area because this place would become like a hotbed because the waters here hitting 80s and even towards the Gulf, maybe even a few 90-degree Fahrenheit temperatures. So these are areas that of great interest to me in regards to not only just threatening tropical systems, but potentially intense ones. Go ahead and take a look at the satellite here and watch how these things are how these two systems we have now are progressing. And you do see a bit of convection and a little bit more organization with this first storm. The second one's still trying to find its identity, so to speak. But this second storm is starting to breathe out a little bit more, I've noticed. Increased convection. There's a pretty good moisture barrier around it. There's no real dry air around the western flank of this, so this can continue to roll forward. Question is, how far to the west will it go before getting kicked out to sea? Because there is still somewhat of a dominant steering pattern, as you can kind of see represented. This is a ridge right here that's trying to pull this to sea. I do think it will eventually do that. This one, I'm not so sure about. It's still very messy, and if it stays messy, it could push further to the west. The stronger these tropical systems will end up getting, the higher the cloud tops and the more these ridges will affect them and ultimately determine their steering track. But towards the lower levels, and this is the amazing thing about wind shear is the fact that with wind shear we have winds moving at different directions, and at each level they're moving at different speeds as well. So these storms are moving slow. Definitely different from what we saw with Danielle and Earl here. Especially once they got their acts together, they started pushing hard to the east or hard to the north, whereas these are kind of just taking their time and trotting in place almost, I would say. Let's go ahead and take a look at the ensembles here, and we're also going to take a look at the not only the wind shear but I can't remember the name, but it's like a tropical, it's some type of tropical trough. I can't remember the exact name right now. It's a little too early for me to remember things like that. Hurricanes are not my specialty, but I'm learning more and more about them. It's still a learning process for me. That being said, let's go ahead and roll this forward here. So main thing that we're looking for with those tropical troughs that I've been talking about here are curvatures just like this, really. Usually with these, we'll get a good idea of not only wind shear, but also wind direction, and ultimately what will cause these storms to be steered in whichever direction. Move this along here. Here's our tropical low, and look right there. Right around where that tropical low is, you can clearly see where these barbs are pointing. Definitely leaning towards this getting kicked out to sea a bit, or just being torn apart. Kind of leaning towards it being torn apart, to be honest. And after this gets kicked out to sea, we won't be seeing anything from that again. Now this might be the second storm. It's kind of hard to tell with this map, and I'll look at another one in a minute to kind of get a better idea. But nothing here really stands out to me as a particular point of interest on this map. But one thing I do notice though is that the winds do start to lighten up quite a bit around here. So the next few storms that may come off of West African coast here could have a greater chance of developing. Do I have any of that nailed down? To be honest, no. But the next weeks, especially the week of the 18th through the 25th, has my interest peaked. Whoa, 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 hold on, what was that? What was that feature? This is the first time I've seen that feature on here, this little black dot here. I'm trying to understand what that means. Like I said, I'm still learning. So, it's a work in progress for me. Jeez. How far out? This thing goes up to about 840 hours out. That's wild. But we're just going to go to 384 because that's all I got available right now, and I don't have too much time to wait beyond that. In fact, my alarm clock is going to go off in about 7 minutes. Oops. Oh, wow. There we go. But this is what the GFS ensemble is showing us. Let's go to the Euro. And then we'll also take a look over home, and then we'll start to kind of lock in on the more finite details here. The Euro already paints a slightly different picture. It's a little bit more intricate looking as well. The Euro is completely loaded at this point. I'll have to reset this as well. Okay. So here's what we got going on right now. Here's one of our tropical lows. And we'll roll this along. And the Euro actually paints a slightly different picture. That storm makes it a little bit closer to the Leeward Islands, and it's interesting to see what it'll do from there. It has it pushing pretty far out to the west, actually. In fact, this looks like the closest and most valuable threat to land that we have, as I was mentioning earlier. But the GFS and Euro aren't really agreeing with each other, so the amount of confidence I have isn't very high yet, especially with as far out as this is, because we're about 180 hours out. That's almost, actually a little bit over a week. So hearsay on what happens next, but even just with this wind map alone, it shows that we're still very much in an active period within the tropics, and we're getting into a point where conditions are a little bit more favorable over the central Atlantic. So these storms will push further and further to the west and become a little less inhibited by wind shear. Things could get interesting in regards to threats to land. The Euro's kind of picking up on that. GFS, not too sure just yet. So we'll move over to the Caribbean. This is the area that I'm most concerned about, and also this is where we're going to see that wind shear start to lighten up, because you can tell by the bars right now they're moving in all sorts of direction. There's, as the British people would say, it's doing bits. But yeah, you can see a good bit of wind shear right here, and then winds pushing this way and this way. That is not an environment that is conducive to tropical development by any stretch. And here's one of those tropical troughs that I was talking about. Something like this right here. You can see a pocket where there's like a little piece of energy here, but around the outside of that, pretty much anything that pops up over this region is going to get torn apart almost immediately. we'll roll this forward a bit, and slowly but surely, I'm anticipating maybe a lightened amount of wind shear. Looks like it's going to take a little bit of time to get to the 18th. Alright, in fact, we're just now reaching the 18th. Oh, crap. It just gave me 18Z, of course. That's the thing about getting model updates here. You kind of have to be careful. Alright, so how far along have we gotten? Okay, we still got a good bit of wind shear. We're still on the 18th. Okay, we're towards the 19th. And it does look like we do start to get a little bit of a lighter wind shear pattern. There is some that's kind of hanging out. It's kind of hanging out towards this strait here between the Gulf and the Caribbean, but it's not quite as prominent as before. It's a little bit more of a conducive environment. Then I'd say towards the latter half between the 18th and the 25th, things really start to become a lot more favorable. And I would particularly watch Florida, I would say. Florida in particular, with the way this looks right here, I would say that there might be a few storms that are pushed further to the east if they do get into the Gulf, so to speak. So I'm a little less concerned about Louisiana, although this can easily change. And hurricanes have minds of their own almost entirely. But based off of this, I'm more concerned about Florida if it goes through the strait here. If it goes to the Yucatan, then I'd be a little bit more concerned about maybe Louisiana towards Mississippi and the coast of Alabama. But Florida looks like the most vulnerable should something occur. And then, oddly enough, if you take a look here, there's a little low that pops off right in this region too. Oh, come on. Hit the wrong button, I guess. There we go. But here's our little low right here, about 204 hours out. You can kind of see this meandering around Cuba here, and then gets into the Gulf here. Wind shear starts to come back into play after the 25th, and either kicks the storm in Florida or just tears it apart entirely. But there is a window where we could have a storm that may have some significant impacts to land. Go to the GFS. All right. Let's go back. All right. It's about where we are right now. GFS paints a little bit different of a picture. Still a good bit of wind shear. Still an unfavorable environment right now. But as we go forward here, and the GFS does tend to be a little bit more extreme, we do see these undulations start to change a bit here, especially once you get towards the Gulf. The Caribbean looks like it's taking a little bit longer to kind of calm down. Why does it keep doing that? But lo and behold, though, oh, there's my alarm. After that interruption, as I was saying, we can see clearly here that the wind shear is starting to lighten up a little bit around here, especially once you get in this strait here. And should a tropical low pop up in here, that's where we, like I said, again, just like with the Euro, things could get pretty interesting. GFS doesn't really have too much anything trying to pop off here. But I do see a pattern in which maybe this wind shear holds off for a little bit longer. But again, GEFS isn't really picking up on anything getting too close. So there's a little bit of a model disagreement there. Gonna have to take this with a grain of salt as we're going forward here, but let's go ahead and look at the ensemble members and maybe the height anomaly real quick before I have to get out of here. I have to start getting ready for work here. Let's trying to avoid this becoming a 20-minute video, but looks like that's inevitable. Okay. So we'll go ahead and look at our height anomaly real quick before we move forward. All right. Make sure we're on the right model this time. So right now the GEFS doesn't have anything significant coming from these two tropical waves at the moment, according to the height anomaly. But, and really, but hang on, this is the area I was interested in earlier when I was looking at the little wind field that we were talking about, but I do think this gets kicked out to sea. But there still is definitely pieces of energy running off from West Africa, but it's just hard to tell where they'll go, especially with things being this far out. So we'll just have to watch this real closely. Excuse me. See what if the Euro paints a different picture here. This could be interesting, and it wouldn't surprise me if it did at this point. We've had nothing but model disagreement with these two models right now. And these are the two leading models, so if we can get some kind of agreement with these two, or some kind of coherence of any kind, it would be then my confidence would definitely start to shoot up. But actually with the Euro here, I mean, it's still the same thing. Plenty of pieces of energy, but no real lock on anything major going on just yet. We'll have to keep watching it, but we'll go ahead and go to the ensemble members, because this will sometimes give us a slightly better idea versus the height anomaly. Height anomaly usually picks up on really strong storms, and sometimes these storms just aren't going to become that off the jump, you know. They need time to develop. So these ensemble members kind of give us a little bit of a probability of low pressure developing, and then where those low pressures could pop up at as well. So here's our two tropical waves right here. You can see this one does try to mature a little bit, and this does make it pretty far west. But then after about 150 hours, it gets really difficult to keep track of. But again, my thought was it going to sea, and a lot of these higher numbers, once again, heading out to sea. There is a fair number that do kind of bring it towards the Bahamas or the Antilles. I can't tell where that is right now. I'll look at it in just a moment. But you can clearly see another big low pressure system that pops off West Africa, but this forms up too quickly and will end up going out to sea. But this is also 300 something hours out, so that has to be taken with a grain of salt. And that's what the Euro is showing us. Let's flip-flop back to the GFS for just a moment. Kick it to about 6 hours out. Going to pretty much be this. I'm expecting for the most part the same look, maybe a slightly different one. GFS isn't super optimistic about this based off the numbers I'm seeing here, but oh wait, there's a pretty high value right here. It's about 96. But again, actually that is a good bit of agreement. This is getting kicked out to sea just like I was expecting. And then pretty much the same look. A lot of pieces of energy coming off the African coast. Any that develop pretty much around this line, anywhere around here, if they mature enough, they just get kicked out to sea by this ridge. Although they are starting to make it a little further to the west, so this is going to have to be watched very closely. Alright, let's go ahead and take a look at the Caribbean now. Didn't set this map up. We also, again, I always want to mention this in my tropical outlooks here. We need to always watch any cold fronts that come through the country, because right on the tail end of this, further towards the south, you can always get some convection to pop up, and then what do you know? You get a quick storm that forms up in an area that may be potentially lighter on wind shear, thus creating a quick tropical storm, maybe even hurricane. See what it does from this point. So this is the GEFS. This is over the Caribbean this time, and again, not really too much of anything. It's going to be hard to pick up on anything this far out. But, well, I do see a little something towards the end of this run. It's about 288 hours out. It's towards the end of that time frame where the wind shear is really going to lighten up, but it's a little bit more towards the east. This could be an interesting scenario here. It looks like the Bahamas right here. And it does look like, according to this right now, it tries to sneak its way into the Gulf. And then could be a potential impact for Florida. But again, with as far out as that is, that has to be taken with a grain of salt. And then I do, interestingly enough, see a couple more areas that could be, I wouldn't say threatening, but interesting right now. But again, have to take that with a grain of salt with as far out as this run is. Alright, let's go ahead and look at the euro, and then we'll flip-flop back one more time, and then we should be done. Might be hearing another alarm in just a minute, maybe. I'm going to try to actually turn that off real quick. Sorry about that. Wait, now we got to reset this again. Alright, we're back. I'm sorry about that. Okay. We go with the euro, and I'm expecting a relatively similar picture. See that ridge forming over the southeast, which will make for some nice weather, by the way. Hopefully some cooler weather though too. I'm hoping that it doesn't warm back up too quickly. Alright, so not too much going on here with the euro. Actually looks pretty quiet. We'll go ahead and look at the ensemble members just to kind of cover all our ends here. Okay, so here we are right now, pretty quiet over the Caribbean. There is a little bit of a blocking ridge here that's also helping push these storms out to sea. If this moves closer to the US, however, could become a very interesting deal, because this could actually end up pushing storms into the US. But also, my thought is, if that ridge were to stay in that position, actually it's moved off to the east here, and that could also push storms out into push storms a little bit closer. I've noticed that these means are getting higher, and they're making it a little bit closer than the last time. Like that one was about where Earl got, as close as Earl got. But I do see, hold on a minute, I do see a little feature that popped up here and here. It's really interesting there. I mean, the height anomaly, as I said before, it's good for picking up the really strong stuff, but these little smaller tropical waves, not so much. Take this with a grain of salt, but you can clearly tell that the euro is picking up on some piece of energy around this region, somewhere within the next 300 hours. We'll take a look and see what the GEFS does with that. But I am interested in seeing where things go from that point. Simply because if we have any sort of model agreements between these two, like, again, as I've said before, these are the top models. This could lead to some very interesting forecasts and times ahead for a lot of people over this region. Oh, GFS has a slightly more aggressive run there, no surprises, but it does have a piece of energy that pops off right before September 21st, and it's in that area that I've been talking about. Have to watch that one real close, and it has decent numbers on it. It has about a 79 out of 100 there. Again, still pretty far out, but can't rule it out. And this does indeed make it into the Gulf. Gets steered into Mexico, though. But then we get multiple pieces of energy popping off there after that. And then also, this is kind of lined up somewhat with what the Euro was showing. A little piece of energy that goes through the Bahamas, makes either a close pass or a landfall into Florida. And then we'll have to see what happens next with that. But definitely some changes look like they're ahead for the tropics. And we'll have to be a little bit more watchful. A little bit closer to home now, too. This is still the peak of hurricane season. We're not done yet by any stretch of the imagination. Even when we get into October, we're not done yet. And with a quieter season, I'm not even ruling out the chance that we may have an active October or even November. So just because it's been so quiet for the first half here, do not let your guard down. That's the main thing that I'm trying to emphasize here. And really, it only takes one major storm to impact land for it to be a memorable hurricane season, which is something that we don't want. But this is all I got for this video. I'm not going to hold you guys up. I've got a lot of editing to do and not much time to do it in. But this has been Tired Metalhead Weatherman. I hope you guys have a good day. I'll see you guys later today.